started Dev Talks with very clear focus, transparency, communication, being open with our players, keeping those lines of dialogue open, and just straight up, we have 5 things we got to talk about. They're just pressing issues with flesh and blood, and I think you're ready to talk about them. I'm ready to talk about them. Our community's ready to hear about them. Missed triggers policy, definitely on everyone's mind right now. I want to talk about infractions in tournaments, punishment for those infractions when they reset. The Hunted, banger set, obviously, absolute all-star set, coming out of the gates really, really hot. A lot of concern around some specific cards in the Hunted and their availability, thinking mostly about Hunter's Clave. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about high seas.
Yeah.
Really excited about that one.
Oh, yeah.
Some timing issues, though, around high seas with regards to U.S. nationals. I want to clear those up. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about our most recent ban, which I feel like we're a little bit behind on. We needed to talk about that a little bit earlier, maybe, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the journey of discovery, all that stuff we've referenced throughout those ban and suspended announcements. But the headline topic, James, what's the deal? What's the deal with missed triggers? Are we happy with the present policy? How do we get to this policy? Is the policy changing? Talk to me about our missed triggers policy.
Thanks, Bryan. Look, the missed triggers policy is there's essentially 2 pathways that you can go down here. There's two options, and it's really important to understand that they are 2 imperfect solutions to this topic. Joshua Scott actually did a fantastic job explaining the context and the premise behind the 2 pathways that are available in a back alley Oracle article. I think it's number 11 that was published in July 2023, and we're going to link to that article in the video description below, so you guys can check that out. But look, the 2 pathways are essentially that players are responsible for their own missed triggers in general, or players are responsible for all triggers that occur in the game. Before I get into sort of the meat of this, I do want to just actually talk about our dev team, and that I really feel like oftentimes I don't get enough credit for the work that they do. And by that I mean our dev team, their job, one of their primary jobs is trying to break our game system. But not just the game system itself, the policies and the rules that sit around the game. And a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of discussions go into the policy settings that we choose to implement and run with. And there are people on our dev team who have played competitive gaming at the highest echelons. We're talking Magic the Gathering Platinum Pros and other very, very renowned and established players from our dev team. Apply their minds and critique our rules and our policies to try and find the vulnerabilities, to try and think like an elite gamer might think of, how can I break this game in all of the different ways available. So saying that, we applied this process to missed triggers as well, and we spent a lot of time debating the pros and cons of the 2 pathways that we have.
So much time in this particular debate
available to us. It is our position that the pathway of players being responsible for all triggers in the game has some very undesirable consequences. Firstly, the fact that you can start accumulating infractions throughout a tournament for triggers that your opponent controls, that you might not be familiar with those cards. They might not even be in the language that you can read or speak. They're not cards that are in your deck. You're not, you don't frequently play with them. It might be some obscure strategy. There's all of these considerations that just aren't obvious at the surface level that can really, bite you. Like, you start racking up these, warnings that can lead to IP penalties, to potentially game losses for cards that aren't in your deck, and you just don't have that level of deep understanding or awareness of, let alone the fact that by being responsible for your opponent's triggers, the mental burden that puts on you is just immense. Like, it should not be underestimated. Like, Flesh and Blood has a pretty complex game state as it is. Just having to monitor your own side of the table, let alone having to keep track of these, like, every single trigger that your opponent may control as well. So I just think it's an unreasonable mental burden to put on players. And that is something that we talked about a lot during the process of committing to, the pathway that we went down. I have a personal story to share as well of uh, the consequence or the outcome that can exist when you have a shared responsibility to track all triggers. And look, back in my teenage years and early 20s, as I've spoken to on many occasions, I played Magic really competitively. I traveled around the world playing. And in those early stages of Magic, from its inception through to 2006, players were responsible just for their own triggers, and then Magic changed their policy and they made players responsible for all triggers in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And as I reached my late 20s, my life changed quite a bit, and I ended up having a hiatus from Magic. We started our business, our national distribution company, and I played a lot less Magic, and still play from time to time. Eventually, my life changed, and I ended up living in China for a while with my wife, and we had a business up in China focused on exporting New Zealand products up there, and running New Zealand pavilions at big like state level expos. And during that time, I was like quite disconnected from Magic and TCGs in general. But during sort of the end of that time that I was up in China with my wife Cece, there was a Grand Prix that came to Shanghai, Grand Prix Shanghai 2012. It was M13 Limited, and I just was kind of craving to play some TCG. To be honest, the work that we were doing up there wasn't very fulfilling, and it was actually one of the reasons that led to coming back to the industry and really embarking on the journey to create Flesh and Blood. Is like, I knew where my heart was, and I wanted to come home.
Sure, I've been there.
And I'd worked really, really hard to support this other business that was really something that Cece was very passionate about, and she was like, okay, you've given it your best shot, helping me on the thing I wanted to do. And I was like, she really supported me to go and pursue my greatest love and passion, which was the TCG industry. So it was kind of a moment in my life journey where it's like, yeah, it's time to come home. And going to that Grand Prix was kind of like the first step through the door, I guess. So anyway, M13 Grand Prix in Shanghai 2012. And like, again, I hadn't played competitive Magic for quite a while at that point. I was a bit rusty, and I was playing the tournament, and in one of the runs, my opponent, he played Angelic Benevolence or something. It's a 4-drop white enchantment that has a triggered ability. When you attack with one creature, you can tap your opponent's creature, and it has Exalted. So if you ever attack one creature, that creature gets +1/+1. And the opponent attacks me, and he taps down my creature and doesn't give his creature +1/+1. And we do combat damage, and we both agree, okay, I'm taking this much damage. And then turn passes over to me, and I start doing my turn and playing a creature or attacking or whatever, and then the opponent realizes, oh, actually you should have taken one more damage. I'm like, oh dude, you missed the trigger. And he's like, oh, that's not how it works. You should have told me that I missed the trigger. I'm like, why am I responsible for telling you
your triggers?
He's like, calls the judge over. Judge comes over, and it's like, yeah, no, you should have told him that trigger should have applied. It's like, did you know that he missed a trigger? I'm like, yeah, like, why would I remind him to apply the trigger? It's like, because it's your responsibility. I'm giving you a game loss. He calls over the head judge. They start to do a DQ investigation, because I intentionally didn't remind him of his trigger, and I was honest about it.
Yeah.
And anyway, I don't get DQ. I do get the game loss. I think I may have even gone on to win that match. I can't remember, but it's kind of beside the point. We play a few more rounds, and I'm in another situation where it's like my opponent has missed a trigger. This time, the trigger, if he remembers it, I am going to lose the game, and I'm stuck in the situation where it's like, okay, cool. So I can remind my opponent about this trigger and lose the game, or I can not remind him about the trigger, and if the opponent or a judge becomes aware of this, I'm definitely going to get DQ'd. So, of course, I remind them about the trigger and lose the game. And I just walked away from that experience thinking, okay, I'm playing at a Grand Prix. This is a professional level event. Why am I responsible for helping my opponent beat me? It just felt so wrong. And I walked away with a very poor experience as someone who really appreciates competitive gaming. I feel at the professional level, very specifically professional, I'm not talking about in-store armories or Friday Mage, I'm talking about professional level tournaments. I believe you should not be responsible for helping your opponent beat you or reminding them of their missed triggers. So that's a personal story. We didn't choose our policy setting based on just that story. It's based on the opinion of our broader team. But I think that is an interesting and very relevant and applicable example of how being responsible for the shared triggers, or shared responsibility for all triggers in the game state, actually leads to some pretty poor outcomes in terms of competitive player experience. I also would just point out that Magic walked this policy back. In 2013. They binned off that mistrigger policy and they went back to making players only responsible for their own triggers. It's a bad policy at the competitive level. So I would say that at the competitive level, at the professional level, at, particularly at the calling and the Pro Tour and the World Championship level, you need to be responsible for resolving your triggers. If your Command & Conquer hits, make sure your opponent bins off their arsenal. If you pummel a card, make sure your opponent discards a card. And yeah, you can say, look, it's unsportsmanlike, it's not the right thing to do, blah, blah. It's just how the rules or the policy works, and it's the lesser of two evils for missing triggers for an in-person paper game.
So one thing I'll say, I think there's a benefit to this policy in that should you want to take this pathway of requiring your opponent to acknowledge their own triggers and only responding to triggers that they do point out very clearly, you have to do so in a very clear fashion. It's just very obvious that you are taking this line, you're not taking this action until specifically you say trigger, and then you move the card to the graveyard. And I think that's all good. The alternative allows you to do some very deceptive things and feign ignorance in scenarios, or move in such a fashion to obscure things for your opponent, quickly move past any triggers you may create and then get them not acknowledging those triggers. Even if it's in your own deck, it's not something they necessarily have awareness of. If you move quickly and move past that trigger, they miss it. Very easy to call a judge at that point and call them out. So I think it is far more exploitable to have a system of shared responsibility. And this just leaves a place where, yes, there is this requirement of acknowledge your triggers, state your triggers, say the word trigger. That's it. That's all you have to do. It is just saying the word trigger.
Yeah.
And the game will progress to its state as written on the cards.
I'll be honest. I would hope that most players, when the Command & Conquer hits, just put the arsenal into the graveyard without having to be asked. Agreed. I would hope that.
That would be my approach always. And I think it's the vast, vast, vast majority of players' approaches.
I agree. Yep. But as the player who is controlling the Command & Conquer, you just got to make sure that that's actually what happens.
Interesting. I mean, it's a policy that is sort of fraught with peril on both sides. As we mentioned, there are no perfect solutions. And so many times when we're doing these policy discussions, if you want to bring me the perfect policy, I promise we will put it into place immediately. And we spent so much time around this issue. I remember hours and hours of meetings talking over all these possibilities and just trying to get to the best place. There is no perfect policy. Bottom line, we will not be able to solve this issue. So we have to make trade-offs, and we have to figure out which is best for the long-term, just feel of our game, the type of environment we're trying to create. And we believe this is the best policy for that.
Absolutely. Yep. Agree. Um, Infractions and resetting at the start of tournaments. I think that this is a separate topic, and it's also something the community has been talking about a lot recently. And I do think that this is an area of our policy that is flawed, and it's not as simple as just changing the policy, though. It's the best that we can do right now, but it is not optimal. And the piece of the puzzle that is missing to actually make the policy better is gem infrastructure. I believe that we need our infractions to have uh, some persistence across events. It should not be isolated to just an event and reset event to event. And something that, I'll be honest, it upsets me to see uh, some players view the current policy settings around the infractions resetting as this like replenishable resource. It's like it feels like there's a bit of a mindset that you start each game with 40 life points and you start each tournament with 2 infractions.
Yep.
And once those 2 infractions are expended, then, for example, you start playing at a reasonable pace. That's just not okay. It is not an expendable, replenishable resource to be exploited in that way. And we are certainly going to tighten that up as soon as we have the gem infrastructure to support event to event monitoring of this. But even in the interim, accumulation of infractions and this demonstrated repeat behavior to exploit it as this replenishable resource is not going to be tolerated. It's completely against the spirit of the game and competitive play and the rules and policies. And you will see action taken on this.
I do want to say, I think with regards to accumulated infractions, there may be a desire from the player base to say, hey, well, how many infractions can I accumulate? What is the number before things start to become problematic? And frankly, if we were to answer that question, then we're right back in the same scenario where you can go, oh, if I get 8 accumulated infractions, then I'll get in trouble. So I'll pick up 7 and I'll keep track of that. So that's not the way the policy is going to work. While we may need greater tracking capabilities across GEM, it's not going to be like we're ever going to lay out, oh, if you get this many across 4 tournaments or your average across tournaments is this many infractions, expect punishment. It is just going to be something that we want better resources around tracking. We are using some interim resources, as you mentioned, to go ahead and track these penalties efficiently. We're just going to get better about tracking is what's going to happen. But I don't think players should expect to get a hard number policy at any point in the future.
Agree. Anything else you wanted to cover?
No, I want to stop talking about policy. I make fun of Josh. He always drags me into these policy meetings, and I'm like, I can't do this again, Josh. Please, not today. But honestly, it's a very important part of our game.
It is.
And I'm happy to put in the hours for it. But we put in a lot of hours, and it's a huge amount of effort, and it's contentious as well. Like, people see these things very differently. And I don't think just because you have a different opinion around trigger policy, I don't think you're wrong. I think there's so many upsides, so many downsides, and it's just about what you're prioritizing the game system for. And we're always going to revisit these things too. I think is the important thing to remember. These policies are never set in stone. In fact, we're going to talk policy this coming week. We're going to have a sit down and reflect on all these things that have kind of transpired over the past few weeks. So that's just a constant part of our approach. I do find policy talk draining, but it's obviously so important for our game.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the kind of experience that we're creating, there's so many moving parts. Obviously, making a great game, like the product part of it is one complex component. And the events themselves, all of the logistics, timing, planning, locations, event staff, judge program training, all of these things, it's another complex moving part. Policy, rule settings is another pillar that's really important and really complex. And all 3 of these pillars really we're always learning, we're always reviewing, reflecting, listening to feedback, checking our premise all the time. I mean, even this topic around missed triggers, I was like, we came back to the table, it was like, have we got this right?
Yep. That was the starting point of all the discussion we've had around this, by the way, is just are we still comfortable with
remind ourselves why we went down this pathway, and we still hold that position. Like, yes, this is the correct policy. And look, I even, reach out across the aisle to some of our peers in the industry, Magic the Gathering, been around for 31 years. They're still refining. They're still evolving. It takes a long time, a lot of thought, a lot of effort, a lot of trying different things and learning from them. And it's a never ending quest. We're committed to it, and I think we're mostly in a pretty good place. And I really do have a lot of appreciation for Joshua Scott. He takes his job very, very seriously, and puts a lot of work into reviewing and refining the tournament, the comprehensive rules and the tournament rules and policy. And not only that, but the efforts that he puts in to communicate to the community as well, with the Back Alley Oracle articles, the Rules Reprise articles, and of course, the judge program. We've got thousands and thousands of judges around the world that Josh and Klaus, Nicolo, my apologies, Nicolo, are working very hard to disseminate, these rules and policies out to the judge community to put on these events for our fans around the world. So it's not for a lack of trying, I can promise you that.
Yep, 100%. All right, next topic. A topic I'm much more happy to talk about, the hunted.
Wow, what a banger.
Look, I just want to put it out there. You've talked before publicly about our hype cycles and how we always are looking at ebbs and flows of hype, and not everything can be up here. And I don't think we had this level of expectation for the hype that has developed around the hunted. It's blown the doors up. Absolutely overperforming. And, there's a lot to reflect on there. We talk about always learning, always reflecting. People love this set, and we're going to think a lot about why people love this set. But there have been some consequences from the love of this set. One that stands out, I know, probably to our fans, to you, Hunter's Clave. It's just a very, very hard card to acquire right now. Do you want to talk about what's going on with that card?
Yeah. Firstly, it's kind of shocking to see where it's sitting out on the marketplace. But look, I want to talk about our philosophy and approach towards printing cards that you need less than like a playset. Like you don't typically, you want 3 of a card, right? Like a Majestic, you need 3 of it to potentially max out the number that you can put into a deck. When a card has the legendary keyword, you can only have 1 in a deck, or weapons in particular that you need less than 3 of. We do adjust the frequency of those cards in products out of consideration to players. You do not want to be flooded with cards that you need less than 3 of. So we adjust those levers out of consideration so that you're just not overloaded with cards that you just don't need 3 of to play the game. Hunter's Clave is printed at exactly the correct quantity, just like other weapons that we've made in the past, like the other assassin daggers.
So no mistakes.
There's no mistakes.
This isn't a surgical extraction.
So it is not a surgical extraction or whoops, it got left off the print sheet. It is printed at exactly the drop rate that we would assign a weapon such as Hunter's Clave, one-handed weapon. Consistent with the precedent that has been used in the past. Literally with the other assassin daggers like Orbital class and so on. Yep.
I think one of the factors that's going on is just the tremendous popularity of this set. It is selling.
Sometimes markets are irrational as well.
Yep. It is hard to get product for some folks right now. And, I think that will change over the coming weeks for sure. We'll see more product hit the market.
Yeah. But again, this is not a mistake. It is not a gotcha. Oh, we're just going to short print this. It isn't. It's decisions that are made out of consideration to players to try and get the relative drop rates or frequencies of our cards aligned with how many people would typically want to own. Yeah, and I think this is important because, look, our fan base is always growing. There's always new people coming into our community, and we talk about this in the past as well. That cards that are legendary stamped, like Pulse of Iceland as an example, you only need 1 of that card, so it appears less frequently. We've talked about this many times in the past, but our fan base is always growing, and I think a lot of people maybe aren't aware of that. And like that's a situation with Hunter's Clave, and again, we do it out of consideration to people just not opening endless amounts of cards that are just not needed.
Yeah. I think another factor in this has been the demand for these cards has been immediate.
Yeah.
Of course, with the Calling Memphis having a release week calling, I think that drove some of that behavior around cards like Hunter's Clave. So it's important for us to talk, I think, about U.S. Nationals and
Yes.
the release of High Seas, which will bring so much excitement. I'm quite sure of that. But there's going to be a tournament, basically release week. Talk about some of the things we're doing to make sure players are not really stuck with a very hard time getting their hands on these cards, or even practicing, say, the limited format before we head to this U.S. Nationals.
Sure. So it actually started with the Hunted. We had a change in our pre-release and retail policy from the Hunted. It's available on the Retailer News Center for those who are interested. You can go and look at the Hunted pre-release FAQ. The change was that retailers are allowed to sell product from pre-release weekend. For the Hunted, it was unlimited quantities. They were able to buy one additional case for each pre-release kit that they were allocated, and they could use that case either for pricing if they wanted to, for offering drafts alongside the pre-release, or to just simply sell to the fans who were in store, either on pre-release weekend or in that week following through to release. The reason it was restricted to just one additional case purchase per pre-release kit was there was some logistics and supply chain issues around the Hunter of just getting enough product into the market for pre-release weekend. For High Seas, we are aiming to get a lot more product into the market. Things are in a much better place in terms of manufacturing and supply chain. So we do expect there to be a lot more product available, especially in the US, which we are prioritizing because of the timing of the US Nationals, so that stores who are running pre-release should have a good amount of product available to purchase on pre-release weekend, offer drafts, so players in the US have good access to cards, good access to drafting, and opportunities to prepare themselves for the US National Champs. We're also going to be working with the vendors who are going to US National Champs to make sure that they have inventory far enough in advance to break it down to process to make singles plentifully available at the US National Championship.
Do you think it's fair to say that the time frame between general availability of these cards and the tournament is in fact similar to the way it was at last US Nationals, where it was the first Nationals up? It was very soon after the release of MST. Is it sort of in that same type of time frame?
Yeah, and I would also say that we the world premiere is 2 weeks before US Nationals, right? So the whole set will be known from world premiere weekend, and people can go out there and start testing and brewing. Get your Sharpies out there and writing on your chaff cards to make up your decks and start testing. And then get down to your local game stores for pre-release weekend, acquire your product, play a bunch of events. Pre-releases are going to be changing quite a lot from High Seas onwards as well, where stores will be able to run multiple pre-releases. We're going to be encouraging stores to offer drafts on pre-release weekend. I have no idea why we weren't doing that prior. It's just crazy. So stores, please start offering drafts to players on pre-release weekends. And yeah, I think that, I hope that the fans in the US see this as an exciting opportunity to be the first country to have the national champs. You get to set the pace. You get to set, the tone for the rest of the world to follow for national champ season. I always remember, back when I was playing competitive Magic, I always loved it when New Zealand Nationals was at the front end of the season, and you felt like you could really, break out new innovation and technology before the rest of the world had a chance to unleash it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the deck brewers out there, the opportunity is ripe to express your creativity and your brilliance at taking the cards in High Seas. It's a really exciting set. Love the set. Hopefully we see it shake up the metagame, much like we've seen the Hunted.
Absolutely.
The incredible Syndra. reshape the metagame in a big way.
Yeah.
That's a topic for coming up next. But yeah, that's where we're at for high seas and US nationals. And look, it's all by design. This is intentional. We see this as being a feature and a highlight for the US players, and hopefully you guys get to set the world ablaze and inspire your fellow gamers all around the world to get down to the national championship and unleash whatever brilliant technology you show the world first up.
I think this segues really well into the next point, and it's sort of about how good our players are now. How
So
quickly they can figure things
So
out.
good.
I mean, you look no further than Syndra winning 2 callings
Yeah.
already, just
Yeah.
immediately upon her release. And I'm looking at early RTN numbers. They're not quite finalized right now, but Syndra, Marionette, both in the top 5 for most winningest heroes. So those decks getting figured out very quickly. Slippy doing very well. Arachne slipped through
So
the cracks.
excited.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, just coming off of a top 4 performance in calling here in Christchurch.
Jason Long,
Yep.
good on you.
Very impressive
Yeah,
stuff.
very impressive.
And he's putting up good numbers. Fang also won an RTN. I know that's kind of like the dark horse hero right now. I think people are still, getting their Fang deck list sorting out. I know folks like Xing Sang played Fang to a top 8 at his road to nationals. So a lot of interest in that hero, still sorting that one out. But in general, folks have moved through this hunted season very quickly,
Yes.
found good decks very quickly. And in fact, I think they found the best deck before the set even was released, and that is Zephyr Needle Ira, a deck that we took action on before even the release of the set. And in our banning of Zephyr Needle, we talked a bit about this journey of discovery, wanting players to have the chance to find these powerful strategies. I think the maturity of our player base, the knowledge they now have around Flesh and Blood, the tools they use to explore Flesh and Blood in these early weeks have fundamentally changed how we have to engage with our players.
Yeah.
We should have, frankly, banned Zephyr Needle earlier than we did. We were about a week later than we should have been. I think it should have happened before the entire set was revealed. We did the next best thing, I think, and came up as soon as possible and really put out an awesome metagame.
Incredible
This hunted
metagame.
release.
Incredible. Maybe the best.
Yeah.
Maybe the best ever.
It could go down as a best ever metagame. But my more immediate point is you should expect us to take earlier action in the future. We just know our players well enough now. They're going to find these decks. They're going to succeed. And leaving behind these super powerful decks, it's going to be something we try to do less in the future. Not to say strong decks aren't going to get through. And sure, maybe we'll miss something. That's always in the range of possibilities. But you can expect that when we know something pushes against those power limits, we're not going to take the approach of, let's give them a 4-week season to go ahead and sort this one
We've
out.
learned our lesson on that one, mate.
Yep. Yeah, I think we got most of the way there with, the Verdant spans in Living Legend. And we were always thinking around Zephyr Needle. We had all these conversations in advance. We shared our internal Slacks where we were talking about this months and months ago. But we didn't quite commit to just pull the trigger before it even hits. And I think that's where we're at going forward from this point.
Yep, indeed. That's just what well said. You covered it all.
Cool. So let's just talk Road to Nationals. I spoiled some of those numbers. Our top 5 heroes right now, I'm looking at New at the top of the list. These aren't final numbers, so this may change as we finalize the results for the week. But New is sitting on top right now. Viscerai close behind. Aurora in 3rd place. Then you get down to Syndra and Marionette, our 2 newcomers on the scene. But the spread is all over the place. I think I'm counting 20 plus heroes that have taken down a Road to Nationals thus far. And then there's heroes that are not even performing in this Road to Nationals season yet that are crushing it on the battle hardened circuit. The 2 heroes I really want to call out.
Yeah.
Verdance with a win in the hands of Majin Bay and a 2nd place finish in the hands of Arthur Trahay.
Big names.
And then Jarl winning a battle hardened. Jarl's only on the board in RTN season for 1 win thus far.
Yeah.
You have to think these 2 heroes, and Verdance is the same, only 1 win RTN season thus far. You have to think things change in a big way come next week.
Surely. And look, Yale won that Battle Harden. They had a top 8 featuring Pablo Pintor, Arthur Trahay, 2 Pro Tour champions.
100 plus person event. This was not a small tournament. This was not an untalented tournament. This was a real piece of competition with a Verdance versus Jarl finals.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah.
I think that just goes to show how much evolution there still is left in this metagame. how about on your end? What are the heroes you're really focused on besides those two? Is there anyone you're expecting to have a breakout that maybe folks aren't really focused on yet? Or what about the progression to Living Legend? How about these dominoes that are going to fall as we move through these weeks?
Yep. Look, I think, firstly, I just want to say how pleased I am with Syndra coming out hot. She looks exciting on camera. I've really enjoyed watching the live streams over the last couple of weeks and seeing her in action. She from a viewership point of view, I think that she's just very enjoyable to watch, and the way that ninjas get to leverage Mask of Momentum in a very new way. Obviously the whole Flick Knives thing with Mask was always a thing, but it was just, the cost was too high. You just couldn't bin off a Kadachi
For sure.
to in the same way that you obviously can with the kunai. So it's very nice seeing one of the old, like the OG staples, right? The OG face cards of Flesh and Blood, Mask of Momentum, really come back into the spotlight, have its moment again. So very pleasing with that. Look, it's fantastic to see Yao rise up finally. I mean, we were originally planning for Yao to release a little bit later, right? But we had a good we had a finger on the pulse of what we thought this metagame would look like internally with Dev, and we made the decision to actually bring Yao forward to release before Syndra and these Redline Dragonic decks hit the metagame, so that players had deck building agency to engage with these resource light decks in the form of ice. So I'm very pleased that we did that, and there is some real paper scissors rock, I think, that's going to start to shake out as this metagame matures and goes forward. And again, seeing Verdance rising up, like one of the best ways to combat small parcels of damage, those 1 point parcel of damage is life gain. So surely that is a big part of why Verdance is rising up, is just her ability to favorably interact with daggers, Flick Knives, and the like. I think it's just pleasing to see that players are embracing many different heroes and many different heroes are winning, and I think that that's important for people to feel motivated and inspired to explore all the game pieces that are available right now.
Yep, totally agree. There's so many ripples. You talk about the small parcels of damage. Part of the, I guess, downside of trying to do damage that way is you don't have many big attacks in your deck. Does that open a door for something like Prism, which we also saw win a Battle Hardened, and is putting up very good RTN numbers right now.
Yeah.
And where's Enigma in all of this? Yeah. She's around, but she doesn't feel like the same threat she was previously. These go-wide heroes really doing an effective job challenging those wards. So there's so many ripples, and as soon as Enigma starts trending downwards, the Guardians are going to rise up and look to get part of the meta.
I think that was intriguing to me, actually. Prism was just so far behind Enigma in the last metagame. She just struggled, she really, really struggled in that last metagame.
So 6th right now on the leaderboard for RTN season.
Yeah.
So right up there with those top 2 heroes.
Seeing the script flip on that one, like Prism, or at least at this early stage of the season, seems like the better illusionist right now. They might change. But where it sits right now, Prism's putting up good numbers.
I can't wait to watch this RTN season unfold. I wish I could be part of it. I can't. You can. You can go play at your RTNs. I would certainly be out there battling if I could. So many constant innovations are going to go on throughout these 4 weeks. And that's going to lead us to our Pro Tour, of course. We're headed to London. I know you're going. I'm going. Can't wait. And all of these stories get to come to a head.
Yeah,
we get there. Are you ready for early predictions? Is it too soon to start thinking about London, or
I guess a bit early?
Okay,
it's give me a couple more weeks to observe this Road to Nationals data.
That's fine.
The other thing is the Living Legend. We are going to be farewelling a number of heroes this year. I think our internal prediction is somewhere between 6 to 8 heroes could ascend this year. I think that's incredibly exciting. So obviously new products come out, introduce new, hot heroes like Syndra that shake things up. But again, heroes ascending to Living Legend
makes a huge difference.
Just as much, if not more, impact on the texture of metagames as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Road to Nationals evolves, who we say farewell to. Looks pretty likely that Visceral will be Yeah, heading off maybe
Zen
next
could
week
go
even.
too.
Yeah,
Zen could go as well. There's
Zen
a
probably
lot
gone.
of heroes that are right on that cusp. That log jam that we've had at the
Yep.
top of the board finally just going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
bust open.
What are some of the numbers? Last year, 14 new heroes, I believe, entered Classic Constructed, and only one left. Throw my left.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So, this year
We've been putting the points into the system. At some point,
yeah.
they are going to just go ahead and push over, and a bunch of these heroes are just going to be gone from the game. And the new meta games that are left behind are going to be ripe for exploration one more time. And I love that constant freshness that we have in our meta games right now.
And again, players' collections, we do have a philosophy that we want players to have utility of their collections over the long run. So, yes, your favorite hero, your current hero, may be allowing, but your cards will be good in another hero either immediately or in the near to mid future.
Yeah, we saw that with Jarl bringing back that Elemental Guardian set. I'm sure there's many more surprises along the way. Any surprises we're giving out today? No surprises today, right? This is just a low key talk about our points type stream.
Does High Seas have pirates in it?
Look, everyone is convinced. I'm just saying, High Seas in and of itself is not indicative of pirates. There's so many things in the ocean.
Come on.
There's so many things. It's just not a guarantee.
High Seas has pirates in it.